Hello and welcome to another session in the Unlocking Archaeology series brought to you by the Southern African Archaeology Student Council. With me today is my fellow council member, Mirriam Tawane, and our very special guest lecturer for today, Mirriam Tawane.
Good day, everybody. My name is Mirriam Tawane. I'm the curator of a collection that is called Plio-Pleistocene Palaeontology at Ditsong National Museum of Natural History. Today, I'm going to take you through everything that we do regarding curating collections that we have either excavated from the field, because that's how we most of the time get our materials that we we work with in the museum. This is the outline of the presentation that I'll be following. I'll briefly share with you what is curation. I will share with you, there are three disciplines that usually confuse the students. I will share the differences between those. I will introduce you to some of the collections that I'm curating. I will take you through some of the collection management practices that we engage on in the museum. I will also take you through the risks to the collections that one needs to really take care of. And digitizations, why do we have to digitize the collections in the country? That's where I will be wrapping up my presentation on. Let's start with curation. The word curations come from the Latin word, which is cure, meaning basically to take care of. And in the museum context, it involves really preserving and managing a collection that is of scientific significance. The Cambridge Library described curation as the selection and care of objects in a museum or to form part of a collection of an art or an exhibition. Like I have indicated, in my specialty of discipline, I curate specimens that fall within a field called paleontology. Paleontology means the study of prehistoric life. In South Africa, we have a very diverse collection of paleontology, ranging from your amphibians all the way to the biggest dinosaurs that you can have. And we know that these specimens were alive because we find their fossil remains. That's one thing that really is evidence that there was life on Earth all those millions of years ago. Here I've indicated you an example of an amphibian tetrapod. This will be the Temnospondyle Lycaredina, and this is the reconstruction. We also have fossil plants in our country because, truly speaking, given a chance, anything can really fossilize. We have fossil plants. The ones that are really common in our fossil record is the Glossopteris, and we also have some cycad that are evident in our fossil record. And then we have the dinosaurs. The example that I used here is Heterodontosaurus turkey, as well as Ngwevu in Tloko. These specimens that I have shown you are more than 100 million years old. So we will be moving closer to specimens that I work with that falls within the range of 5 million years old. These are the examples that I chose to present to you today to indicate that we really do have a diverse history of paleontology in our country that is also linked to paleoanthropology and archaeology that I will share in the following slides. Paleoanthropology means the study of prehistoric men. The difference between actually paleoanthropology, it is a subdiscipline or a division within paleontology, because paleontology has more than 9 divisions. If you really break it down to botany, to vertebrate paleontology, to invertebrate paleontology. And the examples that I have indicated here is Australopithecus africanus, as well as Paranthropus robustus. Australopithecus africanus is one that is well known in South Africa, and it is curated at the museums as well as Paranthropus robustus. The down child falls within the same genus as Mrs. Place, but we now know that Mrs. Place is actually Mr. Place. It's just that the tongue got used to calling it Mrs. Place. So in the presenting this lecture, mind me if I continue referring to it as Mrs. Place. I've been referring to it as Mrs. Place for the longest time in studying. So it is something that we are practicing to really call it Mr. Place, because we know that it is a specimen that was a male species, a specimen. The down child is curated at this university. We also have Additional to this will be Australopithecus promiscuous, that will be littlefoot, and Australopithecus sediba. And then we have Humana lady. Remember that all of these specimens that I have shown to you, they do support the notion that Africa is the cradle of humanity. And they actually started those talks relating to the origin of mankind. They really strengthen the discussion that we, Africa, we are the cradle of humanity. Because when you look at Mrs. Pless, when you look at Australopithecus prometheus, when you look at Australopithecus sediba, when you look at Downchild, they have those features that are still similar to us, modern humans, as well as similar to the great apes. If I may share a little bit regarding that, Mrs. Pless and Downchild and Australopithecus sediba, as well as Prometheus, they have small brains, sizes that are close to the size of a brain of a chimpanzee, that is within the range of 415 carrying capacity. Whereas as modern humans, our brain capacity is 1,400 carrying capacity. But we know that they were bipedal. They were working with two legs just like us. And how do we know that? The foramen magnum, which is a hole that connects the skull to the rest of the body, it is situated beneath, it is at the center of the skull, which means it shows that the animal or the organism was able to take a bipedal posture. That's why we are saying that these hominids indicated they provided evidence to us being the cradle of humankind, as I'm referring to the continent Africa, because remember there are also findings in Kenya that we cannot really ignore. There are findings in we have Lucy, one of the specimens that really do support that notion, that are not within our borders. And we have archaeology. The two disciplines that I have described, paleontology and paleoanthropology, they refer to, they infer morphological differences within a within organisms, whereas archaeology tells us more about past cultures and the way people lived. For example, a paleoanthropologist will look at a specimen and tell you how that specimen would look like, whereas an archaeologist will look at these calabashes, will look at stone tools and tell you how possibly those stone tools were made, and how those organisms who created them really utilized those objects. So that is the difference between the three. Paleontology focuses on specimens that are more than 100 million years old in the country. Paleoanthropology focuses to those that we refer to as our hominid, which are our human ancestors. They date from 7 million years to just as early as 12,000. And then archaeology tells us everything about the way of life of all of these organisms, how they use these stone tools, what did they use to create this rock art, the ochre that they used, how did they create it. So that is the differences between the three that I should share with you. I've shared a little bit about this. I'm going to zoom now on the collection that I do curate, which is the Plio-Pleistocene collection. It is called the Plio-Pleistocene because it falls within a range of 5 million years to 12,000 years. That's what defines the name, because it falls within the epoch Plio-Pleistocene. And at Ditsong, we have a diverse collection. We have your hominids that I have just introduced you to, although some are curated at Wits University. From the slide that I've shown you, we have Mrs. Pless and Paranthropus robustus. The majority of the specimens that you've seen from the hominids collection are housed at Wits University. We have primates, we have your carnivores, we have your archaeodactyls, that will be your bovids. We have small mammals, that will be your Hyrex, and examples like that. Let me share you a little bit about some of the specimens that I selected that I do curate. We have Australopithecus africanus. I have said a lot about Mrs. Pless during this presentation. It was discovered by Robert Broom in 1947 at Sterkfontein Caves in the cradle of humankind. And associated with it, it dated about 2.5 million years. That's when we know that it was alive during that time. I have shared a little bit about the morphology regarding the cranium, as well as its ability to work with two legs. And associated with it, in close proximity and in the very same year that it was discovered, scientists also discovered, Robert Broom and John T. Robinson, they also discovered a skeleton that they labeled STS-14. It was, some researchers believe that it belongs to Mrs. Place, because remember, we've never ever really discovered any postcranial remains of STS-5. So there is a belief within the scientific community that this specimen, actually STS-14, is associated with Mrs. Place. They could be of the same individual, but the discussion is still ongoing. With more technological advancement that we are really exposed to nowadays, we might be able to answer this question with certainty in the near future. And then we have Paranthropus robustus. That is, it is actually one of the Australopithecines also. The difference between this and your Mrs. Place and your Taunchal is that it has a quite a very, very robust structure, as you can see. It has very, very robust eyebrows, eyebrow ridges, and very, very thick bone structure for muscle attachment. And the teeth, it had very, very large teeth compared to the other specimens. Hence, it was clustered in a different group. The difference here, I think it was to accommodate for the diet that it was consuming. Hence, it really accommodated for heavy muscle attachment, because it was chewing a lot. We have also in our collection a specimen that we labeled SK54, as well as SK349. There is a story attached to this. If you can see from the pictures on Paranthropus robustus SK54, you can see that there are puncture wounds. This specimen tells a story. It tells a story of a predator-prey scenario that took place close to 2 million years ago in the cradle. These puncture marks were measured by one of the director at Ditsong, Bob Brain, and he measured the puncture marks to be 33 millimeter apart. And within close proximity, there was a specimen that was discovered, which was called, which was labeled SK349. It belonged to a leopard, Pantherapadus. And he also measured the distance between the canines of Pantherapadus, and they also measured at 33 millimeters. So what he did indicate is that these punctures wounds on the cranium of Paranthropus robustus was caused by Pantherapadus. We are not saying they were created by this specimen that was discovered in close proximity. We are saying they could have been created by an animal of the same form, or another Pantherapadus. We don't know whether it is this one, but this indicated that Australopithecines were actually preyed upon in the cradle at some point. It is actually one of those specimens that when you narrate the story to visitors, they are captured about the evidence that it has, the way we can unpack this evidence to really recreate a scene that took place almost 2 million years ago. It is what really fascinates, what's fascinating about studying fossils and these little clues that they give you to tell a story on behalf of these organisms that are no longer around. These are just additional specimens that we have in the collections. We have STS-71 and STS-52. You can see they are almost not nearly complete, but the preservation is very of high quality, because fossils are fragile, fossils are fragmentary. So when you find a specimen like this, it is really something that you know that you will study it with ease. But we really do a lot of work. We do reconstruction when we come from the field. We really do that. We take time trying to reconstruct and pin these two pieces together to see which one fits where. So it is an interesting field. It needs patience, but it is nonetheless very, very interesting. I have indicated that we have carnivores in our collections. I have put here One specimen that was discovered in Bolsfarm. That's one of the sites that we excavate in. It's called Dinophilus bawi. You can see the extent of the canines. They are really, really robust. They indicate that, yes, this is a carnivore. And also these are also examples of carnivores. We have a hyena as well as another Dinophilus example. You can see the quality of preservation. It is actually fantastic. And we also have some wild pigs as well as small mammals. Procavia transvalensis is a Hyrex. And then we have this specimen here, which is a wild pig that was discovered also at Bolsfarm. I think those are the collections that, those are the examples of the collections that I do curate, and they show you the diversity that we really don't only have hominids, because majority of the communities out there, majority of the students only really are exposed to hominids, maybe because hominids gets maximum exposure when they are discovered. We spend a lot of time really sharing with the general population more about hominids, but there are more to what we create in museums. And where do these collections really come from? I'm going to use my field as an example, paleontology. We usually excavate in the field, but in a museum, in archaeology, we have several collections at Ditsong. We have small mammals that will be your birds. We have ornithology that will be your birds. We also have Lepidoptera. So there are diverse collections that we have. Some could have a opportunity to be donated specimens, especially biological specimens from your national parks. We have archaeology, so they have that option to be donated specimens. And also some curators have the option to buy. Ditsong has 8 clusters museums, so those that curate art could have the options to really purchase those specimens that they believe could be really an addition to their collection. But before one really introduces a specimen into a collection, then minimum associated data that you really need to make sure that you do have, and that will be your locality, especially for paleontology. And this starts when we're in the field. Where was that specimen collected? When was it collected? The date, the name of the collector, or the team that was working on that excavation. Those are the minimum information that you need to record before you really introduce a specimen into the collection. And when you are dealing with a donation, you really need to ascertain the ownership of the materials that are donated to you. As well as when you are purchasing, you need to really make sure that the specimen is an original material that you are really purchasing, adding into the collection. But above all, everything that we do collect, we collect it because we see the potential that it will add more value to the collection. It will add more knowledge than we currently know regarding all the heritage disciplines that we have in our country. And what do we use these collections for? We use collections for research. We undertake research on collections because, yes, we know a little bit about these collections, but there is always room for more learning. There's always opportunities that present themselves for you to study a specimen. Example, Mrs. Bless, all this time it has been believed that it was a female, whereas the discussion started years ago that there is a possibility that it is a male individual. So with the development of technology, the advancement of the machinery that we have at our disposal, we keep on studying these collections, and they keep on giving us more information. So we do research so that we can really add on to the knowledge of what we have in our collections and share more with the public. So yes, we are really doing research on these collections, research that is done by local and international scholars, research that is done by students coming into our collections that just started their university years, even those that are still at high school, they just want to explore different disciplines before they make a decision regarding a career that they want to follow. These collections are accessible to them. And we also use these collections to create exhibitions in our collections, in the museum. Showing you here is one of the posters that we just did, presenting the hominin, South African hominin heritage that we have in our country. You can see majority of all those specimens that I have shared with you. We have put all this information in one poster so that a visitor can come into the collection and go into that one particular spot and read all of this information on their own. So we use these collections for exhibitions, for teaching. And this slides that I'm sharing are a collection that has just been completed by the ornithology team. They were doing a Prince Davis collections. I mean, you can just see the level of presentation of the birds. This is just another example of part of that exhibition display. And this is just another one. So we are utilizing the collections that we have to share information with the general population. We are not only just using them to maybe do scholarly work, we are also using them to share that knowledge with everybody else who is really willing to come through the doors of the museums. And we also do school tours. This is one activity that really is close to my heart. We cater for everybody else. It doesn't matter the age. It doesn't really matter the needs. We try to really accommodate everyone with their needs. So we can see here we had a group of scholars, primary schools. They came through to the museum. And we also do develop worksheets that are really school oriented. We do consider the national curriculum, the CAPS curriculum, when we do our exhibitions and even when we do those outreach activities in the museum. So that's one thing that we really are in line with, making sure that a scholar comes to the museum, they experience the exhibitions that we have, but also they are learning something that they are doing at schools, something that impacts within their curriculum. Just like any other discipline, there are legislations that we really need to abide with, legislations that we need to observe in our country. With regard to paleontology, archaeology, and paleoanthropology, we have to follow three national legislations, national acts. That is the Cultural Institutions Act, the National Heritage Council Act, as well as the National Heritage Resources Act. From all of these, then internally within an organization, we have to develop policies as well as standard operating procedures that we have to follow, we have to implement when we do collection management in our daily activities. So yes, we have to comply with the law, and that's what we do because we are actually dealing with heritage objects that are really, really sacred to the country, that really share knowledge that we really need to conserve as much as possible. Looking at collection management, where does it start? How does one do it? When I look at my field in paleontology, it takes something of a linear form. It starts from field work and it starts with something that we call inventory. And I'm going to take us through all the activities that we do regarding this. When you go to the field, this is one of the field trip that we had before the pandemic at Bolsfarm. We work with a team from, we collaborate with the French researchers. So when you go to the field, you collect specimens. Sometimes you know in a particular site that there are certain specimens, like for Sterkfontein, we know that Sterkfontein is rich with hominid remains. Now we have sites that are really being excavated. We have Malapa, we have Dinaledi Chamber that are coming out. We have Swartkrans, Kromdraai. Those sites contributed to us finding hominids, to us finding carnivores, as well as Bolsfarm. Bolsfarm, well, right now we have not yet found any hominid, but it is a site that really has contributed a lot to the collections that we curate at the museum. We have found carnivores, we have found bovids in this site. So when you are at the site and you find a fossil, you start by documenting the locality. We do work within what you call grid squares. You document that, and then if you can identify the morphology of the specimen. Then you will record the skeletal element, whether it is a radius, it is a humerus, it is a tooth. You will label that. You will also label any other information that you deem will be essential for us studying the specimen further. We will document as much as we can from the field, and those are what we call field notes that we usually do use when we are creating what we call catalog books. I will share a little bit about that when we go as carrying on with the presentation. And when you come into the museum, you have to do what we call accessioning. Accessioning is a process where you assign a particular specimen a permanent unique number that it is the only number that it will carry within the collection within the museum. In South Africa, we follow a system where majority of the accessioning number, they have a prefix. A prefix will be maybe a site, like we see here an example of KA63. KA will mean Kromdraai, that when I pull out a specimen for a researcher, they will automatically know that this specimen was discovered in a locality called Kromdraai in the cradle of humankind. And accession numbers are chronological. Let's say you went for a field excursion in April and you excavated 200 specimens. You are going to label those 200 specimens starting with the last entry that you have in your catalog books, so that there is continuation of numbering regarding accession numbers. So this is how we give these fossils, these identities within a museum. It is a permanent number that really, yes, it might have associations when we are studying fossils, that you might find that KA63 might be associated with KA75. Maybe they form part of a mandible. Then those are the notes that we will keep on adding to the catalog books to indicate that this specimen is associated with that one. So that is what we call accessioning. It is giving all these specimens that we bring from the field identity numbers. That is, we add when we are adding them to the collection in the museum. As you can see here, this is a picture showing you, this is the vault, one of the storage rooms that we have at the museum. You can see here we have STS 565, STS 564. The STS would mean that these specimens were discovered at Sterkfontein. We have SK 554, that means this one was discovered at Swartkrans. So that's how we identify specimens in a collection. That's how we undertake that duty related to collection management. This is just an example again to show you the different sites that we excavate on, and just to indicate that when we do, I apologize, when we store these specimens, we are really, the location within the museum, this is something that I'm going to share a little bit going on. It's something that we really pay attention to. You will find a particular section dedicated to maybe carnivores. You'll find a particular section dedicated to hominids. You'll find a particular section dedicated to bovids. So we are very, very particular regarding how we really store the collections in the museum. Looking at catalog books and databases, when we have given a specimen an identity, which is an accession number, it has to be added into the catalog book or the electronic database of the museum. And information that we do add regarding this, you will add the description, whether it's a mandible, whether it's a pelvis. You will add the location. Have you stored it in the vault? Have you stored it in room 21? Have you stored it in room 18? Because those are the rooms that we have in the floor. And you also have to add on the information that you collected from the field, the locality where it was collected, who collected it, when was it collected. Those are the information that we do include in what we call the catalog books, as well as the electronic database. And we also do identify these specimens. So if you have collected a specimen in the field, you have to identify it. You know the identification of the animal kingdom. You have to identify its order, you have to identify its family, You have to identify its genus as well as the species, so that we really know that what have you collected. And for that, you will need a specialty in the field. There are those people that you will really specializes in vertebrate paleontology. There are those that will really specializes in studying carnivores. There are those that will specializes in studying hominids. So you are going to need to bring those researchers on board when you really identify these skeletal remains, so that you are really sure about the identification that you have you have put down as being a label for that particular specimen. So during this process, we do create what we call manual catalog books as well as digital databases, and the two need to mirror each other. The information that is on the manual catalog book that is handwritten mostly by the curator, needs to be very similar to the electronic digital records for that particular specimen. So everything needs to be aligned so that we really can be sure of our record keeping. This is just an example of one of the storage rooms. You can see these boxes indicate we have specimens inside here. Yes, we are using closed boxes so that we try to control the conditions that we store these fossils in. Yes, they are fossils. People will tell you that they have survived millions of years, but that does not mean that we do not have to care for. Remember, majority are fragile, so we try to contain the conditions that we store them as in a constant manner. We try to control the temperature, the humidity, but that information I will share on in the following slides. And this just shows you that we label everything. If a box contains primates, if a box contains carnivores, or it contains equids, it will be labeled outside. And this numbering that you see in these boxes, we were undertaking inventory to comply with GREP 103. That's one of the legislations that we have to comply with, one of our accounting standards. That really tells us that you need to know everything that you have in your collection. You need to know the number of specimens you have in your collections. You need to know where they are located. So we were undertaking that process, double checking our records, as well as creating that huge metadata that we need for the specimens. One of the steps that usually others regard as a last step, but it is actually not a last step, because curation is an ongoing process that you do on a daily basis. It doesn't matter whether you start from inventory or you start from accessioning, but it is something that really you do every day in a collection. Inventory or verification, as some others call it just tells you that when you pull out a manual record or you pull out a digital record and you look for a particular specimen, their data needs to be aligned. Whether you start inventory, it is twofold. You can start looking at the records that you have on hand, or you can start going at the storage location at your vault, your storeroom, and you pull out a particular specimen. And when you pull out that particular specimen, they'll say it is located in the vault in one of the shelves, broom room, shelf 11. And then you go to the manual catalog books. The manual catalog books need to tell you the very same information that is correlating with the storage location. It has, and also the digital catalog. So this is one process that we do to check that all the fossils that we have are accounted for, and also to really ascertain that our record keeping are in place. It doesn't matter whether you start with the manual record or the digital record, or you start at the storage location. The results needs to be the same. When you start searching from manually to the storage location, we say you are starting from the records to the location. But when you retrieve a specimen from the floor itself and you track it down using your records, we said you start from location to records, and the process needs to give you results that are really similar in both ends. That really, when your records are really that aligned, you know that your collection management is really something that you are doing well. You don't have any discrepancies within your records. How do we manage these collections? How do we conserve them? And what is it that we need to look out for when we are really taking care of these collections? One thing that we really need to pay attention to in museums is pest control, as well as environmental controls. I've shared a little bit about this. We need to really look at, we do usually do inspect our collection rooms to search for any activities regarding pest control, because pests are really not, they are not good for any collection. They are not, be it whether you are curating fossils or you are curating beadworks or you are curating some leather in archaeology, or you are curating birds. We really do not want pests in our collection. So we do monitor we do inspect our spaces to see that really we don't have any activities of insects. And we also have to make sure that the room's temperatures as well as humidities, we keep them in as constant as possible. We do monitor the room temperatures. You can see here we have a temperature humidity clock. There are certain temperatures in paleontology that we have decided that those temperatures and humidities are the ones that are really something that fossils can survive on, and we do monitor them daily to just to check that there is no massive fluctuations between that. And in a yearly, once in a year, we do fumigate the entire museum so that we really do make sure that insect is not a situation that we have to worry about. I have inserted here one of the pictures showing the damage that water can really do to a wall. And this is one room in one of the museums that we collaborate in. They have a very, very serious issue of mold. You can see that the mold that they have here is now actually a concern. It is actually a danger to the collection that they have inside this room. So that's why we do make sure that those conditions, they are really as constant as we can try to keep them. There are also risks to collections that one really have to pay attention to. I've already discussed the pesticide issue. There is also theft. We cannot really shy away from discussing theft within the heritage sector in our country. Therefore, the securities that we have should really, the securities around collections, it's something that we really do pay attention to. It is something that we really take seriously because we have to preserve these collections for generations to come. They are very, very unique. Majority of them are something that you cannot really replace at a snap of a finger. They are very, very rare. It's, you have one of a copy. So if you really lose them, then the heritage industry have lost in South Africa. So we really do take the securities of the collections very, very seriously. And mishandling of specimens. I have indicated that fossils are very, very fragile. So it doesn't matter whether you are an experienced researcher or you are a student who've just entered into the field of paleontology. A specimen can just drop to the floor. So that's one of the risks that really we have to consider when we work with these fragile specimens and find a way to mitigate risks like that to the collection. There are also disasters that we really, sometimes we can't do much of. Remember the Cape Town fire that broke down recently in the country, and the libraries that they lost, the collection of the libraries that they lost. So this is one of the concerns that we really need to, it has to be really not at the back of our minds. It's something that we really have to consider all the time, that a fire is something that can really break down in a museum. What do we do regarding that situation? How do we preserve the collection? How do we save the collection regarding that? But before we even get there, how do we make sure that we do not find ourselves in a situation like this? Yes, disasters do strike, disasters do happen, but those are the issues that you as a curator, curating a collection, as well as the management of that particular institution, those are the things that are really part of your talks, that in case of a situation like this, do we have plans in place that will really mitigate the situation? And flooding, water, it's not something that really is beneficial, especially to carbon collections. Imagine a library being flooded. It is something that really, imagine a bird collections, a dry section of ornithology being flooded. It's something that really we cannot afford to have. So those are the disasters that when you are curating a collection, you need to think about this. You need to think about ways that you will really put in place. You need to have mitigating factors in place that you will really counteract these situations when you are really faced with. So that is part of your daily responsibility as a curator. That forms part of your collection management and conservation. Those are the responsibilities that you cannot pass to anyone. They start with you. Yes, management will play an oversight role, but you are the person overseeing the collection. You are in that floor. You are within those specimens every day. So this becomes part of your worry for the survival of the collection. I have added here digitization. Imagine one of these disasters that we have just discussed, it strikes. What do we do then? How are we going to make sure that we have something to show for the generations to come? One of the options that we can implement is digitization. Digitization means just you convert what you have, that physical object, into a digital form that can be processed by a computer. It really does help, considering the fact that specimens could be lost, but those are one of the I'm going to share that in the coming slides. So digitization is one of the activities that we as a museum are starting to talk about. Some have started to implement to really counteract some of the risks to the collection. And it can be threefold digitization. You can refer to digitization is that a manner of scanning or digitizing books or documents or your library archives, or we can refer to it as recording data for each specimen in a collection, in a database. The very same information that I said we undertake, recording information from the field. When you accession, you create an entry into a manual catalog book or a digital electronic database. That is digitization. We use it for those accounting standards that you have to comply of. Or imaging of a specimen, creating a digital copy of that specimen. Those are the three ways where we can really implement digitization. But as we would have it, the third one that I have listed here is the most expensive, but it is something that we really need to consider for the survival of the collections that we have, so that we really do have something to show the future generations should any of the disasters strike. But we really do believe that we will be spared any disasters when we are dealing with collections, but things do happen. So why should we digitize? I mean, why should you want to have a digital copy of Mrs. Place? Why would you want to have a digital copy of Paranthropus robustus? The availability of that 3D model, it will really help a lot when you do your research. I mean, you can print 3D models. You can really use it for educational purposes. And when you have those copies, that minimizes the chances of you handling a specimen. So it really does help regarding that. You just print a 3D model instead of always pulling out a copy for the researchers. You can use the printed model, because they are really similar. The measurements that you would get from the original, they would be similar to the measurements that you would get from a copy or a cast. And also another one that I've just said, they do help when you lose a specimen or when there is really irreparable damage to the specimen. The ones that I've just alluded to, maybe in case of theft or any form of catastrophe. If you have that digital copy available, then you know that you do not have the original, but we have something to work with that could really replaces the original. Right now, just look at the condition that we are facing. We are living in a pandemic that has forced us to really close our borders, that have forced us to restrict travel. Imagine I'm sitting at Ditsong museums for this collection. I don't have any digital copies of, I don't have any 3D models. And the researchers sitting abroad who would like to study the specimen. How do we sort out that problem? I mean, these digital sets, they are accessible either physically or remotely. These days, it's just a matter of the other research on the other side downloading the link that we do give them to access that. So digitization will help us really to increase the research output that we do have to do, regardless of the challenges that we might be facing. COVID-19 did teach us that if there is something working in an isolation structure is something that we have to look at. So how do we do that with these fossils? And it's, some are so fragile, some are so rare that you would not even want to remove from where it is stored. So these 3D models will replace that activity. It will really be a form of replacement for you to lessen the burden on the original specimen. Having said all of this today, I think we can all agree that museums do really play a role in our communities. They do share with us the events that occurred in our countries. If you look at cultural museums, they will tell you really what happened to us, the history that we're exposed to, the natural events that we're exposed to. I'm referring to evolution. The little bits that we could really not document ourselves, museums hold those pieces that we really need to really observe, to really visit and look at. South Africa is very, very rich regarding the heritage that we have. We have collections ranging from arts, we have collections ranging from your calabashes, your African pots. They do tell a story on how our forefathers used to live. Those are places that we really need to visit to really study about the events that we can only be narrated to, the events that we were not yet here to observe, but events that really shaped who we are. They shaped the society that we are now living in. They shaped the society that we will become. They really are going to have an impact in our future going forward. So I am saying thank you very much for listening to the talk. We at the National Museum of Natural History hope to see you soon. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. It was really amazing. I was busy making notes on the side, busy preparing a little quiz for all our listeners and students to go and complete, after they've listened to your presentation. Just first a comment from my side. Your closing slide being the Ditsong Museum of Natural History. I remember visiting the museum. It was the first museum I ever visited. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. And back then it was still the Transvaal Museum.
Yes.
And I just remember the incredible impression it had on me in terms of also, getting me addicted to heritage and archaeology and paleontology, and the big influence it had on my decisions in life to follow a career path in archaeology. And looking at the one photo in your slide presentation, also with all the school learners visiting the museum, I hope that these experiences and exposures to our museums really inspire a lot of these young kids to follow careers in heritage and archaeology and paleosciences. So I have 2 quick questions for you. The first relates to the Ditsong Museum, especially the National Museum of Natural History, in having one of the most extensive collections in the Southern Hemisphere, and just how fortunate we are to have this absolute vault of information and resources at our fingertips. So my question to you is, how much would you encourage students to actually come to the collection and look at some of the materials, even those that have been looked at in the past, the importance of reanalysis, and encouraging students that if you are in the fields of paleontology or archaeology, that you don't necessarily have to go and do new field work. We have a lot of material in our museums that if you're a lab rat, excuse the the lack of a better term, but if you're a lab archaeologist, if you're a researcher that enjoys this type of work, just maybe motivate students to please come and look at the collections.
They really should. We have a diverse, and like you said, some of the excavations in South Africa have started as early as 1920s. So we have a lot that they can go through. We have stories changing. You would find that a specimen was labeled as a particular specimen 20 years ago. Now, because of technological advancement, now it changes the label. We now know that it was not that particular organism that they said it was. So they really have to make time to come and visit our collections. We are there to serve them as the youngsters of tomorrow. We are there to serve them as the future professionals in the industry. So they have to utilize us. They have to come and really learn. Dedicate a day to visit natural history. Dedicate a day. I mean, we have a diverse of collections. Whether you are interested in herpetology, that will be your snakes. Whether you are interested in small mammals, we would accommodate for you. Whether you're interested in beetles, we have that. So come and explore. And we also have a museum dedicated to cultural history. I don't know if they know that we have a massive collections of archaeology, a massive collection of anthropology, a massive collections of art. So be it you want to be an aspiring art student, we have something that really can relate to you. Visit us. We, the researchers, we are there to assist you. Just because museums they are not places, yes, they can serve as places of leisure, but more than anything, they are institutions of learning. I think that's a narrative we really need to change in our country, that they are also an institution of learning. You go there to learn. You go there to enrich yourselves. You go there to really have these little answers that you need answered in your life, that you really think that if I can explore this, my career choice might just change. So yes, they really do come. They should come and really just go through the galleries if they really don't have to. They don't want to make appointments with curators. But should you have that burning question, contact the curator for that particular section. Get to the museum, speak with the receptionist. They will direct you to the person that you really have to talk to, and we will make time, because we really have a lot to offer as South Africa regarding heritage. We contributed immensely to the knowledge production regarding every discipline that you can think of in the heritage sector in our country. So they are not there for us to really keep them in shelves locked under, say, heavy security. Yes, they have to be protected. They are protected. We take security very, very seriously. But they are there to be enjoyed by the communities, and not only scholars only, be it as somebody who just have passion for where do we come from as humans. I mean, can you really tell me that 7 million years this activity started to take place? Because that's one of the burning issues in South Africa, evolution. We have the specimen to really give you the scientific reasoning behind it. So visit us, then we will convince you that it is actually a theory that evidence in this country can support. So they really should visit us. The future scientists of this country, they should really visit us and really just have a discussion with us. Yes.
And also, in addition to the museums being so open and welcoming, and curators being really helpful in terms of anyone who wants to do research on the collections, we also have a lot of great institutions who collaborate with our museums on projects. I'm thinking now in terms of my own PhD, I was working with the, interesting that you mentioned, the National Cultural History Museum, which is just down the street. And I actually did work on some international objects from the museum, of which the exact dates of origin and production methods were still unclear. So I did my research on stuff that was available in the museum, and through collaboration with the Nuclear Imaging Corporation of Southern Africa, NEXA, we performed 3D scans on the objects that I was looking at. So in terms of that, I mean, there's a lot of work being done in terms of non-destructive analysis of museum objects, which of course, if you say the word non-destructive, then I'm sure you get very excited about the fact that we won't be damaging your collections.
Yes.
When we
love that word.
Yes, so a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities in Southern Africa, a lot of advanced technologies that are available to researchers. But I can go off on a complete different direction with that, because that's my passion. But I have one more question for you. In terms of the importance of digitizing museum collections, and I'm glad that you used the absolute devastation of the library at the UCT campus now recently as an example as to why it is so important for us to digitize our museum collections. Archives, books, taking photographs, digitizing existing photographs, now with the different technologies, allowing us to create 3D models, not just for the preservation of our museum collections, but also, like you mentioned, facilitating research online, electronically, making collections accessible to researchers from other countries. And once again, using my own research as an example, the items that I looked at, I did comparative analysis with objects in international museum collections. And if not for the availability of their digital collections, I wouldn't have been able to do the research that I did. So on that line, is there any way that students can volunteer or become involved in some of these digitization projects? I know sometimes museums are a little bit short-staffed, even if it's just in terms of, you know, maybe someone who is in the field of archaeology and paleontology, but maybe also did an advanced course in photography, or, you know, has experience in transcribing records, or, you know, anyone who is actually in the mood to come and volunteer and help out with digitization projects. Are there any such opportunities at the moment?
Currently, we don't have, because at Ditsong we have put funding to set up the structure for digitization. We do have digitizations that is taking place, but it is done by NSCF, one of the forums set up by Department of Science and Innovations. So they are assisting us. But the moment that I know there are universities that are really start trying to, from an honors level, they are really focusing on making digitizations the majority bulk of the researchers of the research for students, because technology is advancing. Yes, we maybe in Africa might not be within the same level as first world countries, but we are catching on. So the opportunities, I think, will present themselves. And the moment really we do have a structure at Ditsong to do that, I'm sure we would not say no to volunteers to really come. And because that's actually one of the motivations for the funding, that we are going to make this open to postgraduates. We are going to make this accessible to undergrads, so that they are exposed to this field of study that we really have not yet explored. Remember, I studied paleoanthropology, recording everything with a pen, measuring my bones with a caliper, but now there are softwares that I can just put scan a specimen and then just instruct the software to take measurements of this and that, and then I have my statistical data. So that development is taking place, and we are really now, majority of the projects that I see, researchers at universities and also at museums, because we do collaborate with institutions of higher learning. We try to make sure that majority of the projects that scholars do undertake, they have a technological element. They have that element that exposes them to digitization. So it is a field that within 5 years' time, I think it will really have developed a lot. It would have created its own professionals. So I am happy with the progress that we are really, the strides we are taking regarding developing people who can really do this, because it is a skill. It is not just a matter of taking a picture of a specimen. It is a skill you have to take. You really have to take time to learn the specimen, to really, you know, where you have to focus your camera, because some use it regarding photogrammetry, some uses using laser scanning. Those different techniques require different skills when you perform them. So we are really developing the country, and we are putting resources we are putting more time to students also, so that they are really technology savvy. They can really utilize these resources that we have. You mentioned Nexa. I've worked with Nexa several times. They have technicians there that really would really, I mean, you give them a copy of a fossil and they give you something that you can do wonders with their software. So we have to really teach students that you can be a paleontologist, but you can be a paleontologist that really specializes in digitization. You can be an archaeologist. Look at what they were doing at the Pansy Museum in Devon. They were scanning a beadwork West Coast. It's the development in the field. It is so amazing that we really need to encourage learners to really participate, to really just want to learn as much as they can. But yes, opportunities are coming at the moment we really are equipped with the necessary equipment. I'm sure we will really take on volunteers, so that we pass on the knowledge that knowledge doesn't, it's not something that you sit on, it's something that you share, it's something that you pass on to others, so that they also pass on to the next person. So yes, I can't wait to have volunteers.
But I think,
provided I have the equipment.
yeah, the equipment and the funding, yes. But I think in that regard, if students are really passionate about contributing to digitized databases, that you can take the initiative to do that as part and parcel of your own research. I mean, like, for example, with my own research, the data sets that I collected, if that can form part of, you know, an online database where people can use that data to create, you know, 3D models. It wasn't necessarily, you know, a dedicated digitization project, but digitization was a result of my research activity. So students must also kind of then realign their thoughts to say that, okay, well, if I can't go volunteer, let me make it a part of my research objectives to
exactly, yes,
to
something that we are encouraging them to think outside the box, really. Technology is a part of us, especially with the pandemic that we are living with on COVID-19. Right now we are hosting this meeting that, if it was not for the pandemic, chances I would have had it in a physical form. So now we are doing it online, and it is still serving the very same purpose that the physical possibly workshop would have served. So we really, I think, as devastating as this pandemic is, it forced us to really consider ways of working in an isolated form, in an isolated manner, but in a collaborative sense.
yes.
That's something that really it has pushed us to really rethink, and we really cannot delay digitization, especially regarding the catastrophes that we did mention. We really need to prioritize the fact that despite what happens, we have that copy of a 1902 library that generations to come will have to really have access to. So that's something that we really need to consider. And I'm glad our government is really taking initiative, and universities are also investing in those activities. So we are on a good road. We are making advances. We are making progress regarding that. So it is just a matter of, when you did not budget for something, when you really have to start from scratch. Some of the museums like us, we did digitizations, but it was done by external parties. We have the bare minimum in the museum to do it. So that pushes us to say, guys, we need a massive structure for this. Let's put our heads together and try to find out if we really can't have one in our institution. So yes, it pushes one to think outside the box for the mere purpose of preserving the collection.
Yes, and I think one of the issues that you also touched on now in terms of the pandemic, in terms of us now hosting digital workshops that previously would have been physical, it has actually also forced us to rethink how we communicate our science. And well, it ties in with science communication, which is also incredibly important. And I think through science communication and exposing a wider audience to what we do and why it is important, eventually we'll get to that feedback loop where the people who are in charge of, in government, in charge of giving more funding towards these types of projects, through science communication, get to that understanding and realization why these initiatives are so important, and start pumping us full of money to say, here's a couple of billion for this project.
we need that.
We need that, definitely.
We can't say no to any funding right now. We would
Yes.
really appreciate it and we will utilize it, really. Yes.
I see
So
Saramya is back online. Sorry to interrupt. I see Saramya is back online. It looks like he also wants to add something.
Yes, thanks, Miriam. Thanks, Mariette. Regarding, science communication, one of the important aspects is conveying it in local languages. So I would really like to know from you, Miriam, how has your experience been? Because you have been in various schools, to communicate about museum that you are part of. So how has your experience been? And what does a museum perhaps going to do during the exhibits, say, for example, have the material written in local Southern African languages. So, if you could highlight some of these aspects, that would be great as well.
Okay. Thank you, Saramya. Yes, I have done several outreach activities where, the subject that I work with, it is very, very complex. And the downside of evolution is it was not part of the curriculum when the teachers that are teaching it were being schooled at school. So some have to really teach themselves the materials that they have to deliver to scholars. And it is complex. It has several aspects that others really do not want to engage in. You would think, religious beliefs also do affect how it is accepted or not accepted within a community. So having to teach a complex subject like this, that you also a teacher did not even were taught on, it is very, very challenging. And even the materials that we are using, some teachers have usually complained that the textbooks themselves, sometimes they are really not helping regarding empowering the teachers so that they are confident in delivering this information. Now imagine you are a student, imagine you are a scholar, and this subject is part of your national curriculum. You're going to be examined within this material, and what you are absorbing is something that you do not even understand. It does not even make sense to you. I mean, when you tell students about 6 million years ago, the deep time aspect on its own is very, very challenging. So when we have the opportunity to present it to the language that they understand best, I've realized that they do get the message, they do understand it, and we really do try to accommodate scholars within their mother language as much as possible, so that we break it down as simple as possible for them to really take the message. So it is something that we have done, and it's something that has been successful. It's something that we are going to carry on doing. And regarding the museum, we have a language policy internally in our museum. Digital museums have decided to use 3 languages. That will be English, Afrikaans, and one other native language. I think it's Pedi, if I'm not mistaken, Northern Soto. So there have been talks for us to translate some of the exhibitions in different languages that scholars or even the general population can read. Imagine when you come to a display that is written in English, and English is not your first language, and it also speaks of a complex a topic that speaks of geological times, or it speaks of something as complex as biodiversity of snakes, something that really you need broken down, and yet you don't have a tour guide next to you. So if that information, if you have that, the display is presented in two languages, English and a language that we remember we are situated in Tawane, so we have to consider the majority of the locally spoken language. So the plan is to convert some of the displays into different languages so that a visitor can come and really read the display at ease and really just grasp the message. So that is one thing that we are going to implement going forward. And one of the colleagues recently asked me a question. She said, what about Braille? Where are we going to do that? So also that is another question that we really need to answer. So we are considering all the communities in South Africa when we are putting up displays. The hindering factor could be funding, because yes, museums have really, we are receiving the bare minimum that we can from government, the bare minimum that government can afford to give us right now. So lack of funding, lack of resources really will delay us implementing some of these policies that we have in place that we want to implement, so that we can reach the masses. And the masses are really, when they have visited Ditsong, they leave Ditsong, they said, that was worth my time. I learned something, I gained something. So those discussions are taking place internally. We are limited by resources to implement them, but it's something that we really, if we have funding today, majority of the displays in our collection would really speak to the language policies that we have internally in our organization. Yes.
Absolutely, Miriam. I think there's a lot of scope and opportunities for, carrying forward the works. I was just reminded how closely linked this aspect is to decolonization as well, and I was reminded of a quote that I had come across, which had referred about within this global South, phenomena of exchange, how it was about, how the subaltern are speaking, but in the English language.
Mm-hmm.
So, that reflects on how important it is to act at the same time, convey our messages and both social and scientific language in our own mother tongues. So I think that is one theme that, as budding archaeologists, as students, we need to simultaneously think about during our undergraduate studies and postgraduate studies. So I think that is one lesson I'll definitely take away immediately and work on it at the same time. So yes, thank you for bringing and highlighting this aspect.
Okay, well, thank you once again, Dr. Tawane, for a fantastic session today. I think our students are going to really enjoy this. I love that you gave such a solid overview of the curation process. I think few people appreciate the amount of work and effort that goes into managing museum collections and making these collections accessible to us as researchers, to do work and, learn about the past and teach other people about the past. And once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Dr. Tawane, once again.
Thank you for the invitation, guys. I really appreciate it.
It was a great honor to host you today. And everyone, have a fantastic day further. Bye.
You too. Bye.